What's going on, guys? We have been getting a ton of Diablo 4 news lately, so much so that I can barely keep up with all of it. Yesterday we got the Necromancer reveal, we were told that the game is releasing in 2023, and we got a pretty long gameplay video. And today we got the Diablo 4 quarterly update, which just goes into greater detail about the Necromancer and the class mechanics. Now, I already made a video breaking down the gameplay footage of the Necromancer that we saw yesterday, and we looked at all the different skills that were within that video, and we made a lot of our own assumptions about those skills, and it turns out that I was pretty much right about a lot of them, and we'll find out more about those skills in this quarterly update here. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Okay guys, so the quarterly update starts off with them saying that this is going to be primarily focused on the Necromancer. They will have three things that they're going to be talking about, which are the class features, the playstyles, and the Book of the Dead. So let's get started with the class features. The Necromancer has two different types of resources that they can use: Essence and Corpses. Essence is their primary resource, which restores itself automatically at a slow rate. Using basic skills on the Necromancer will also grant Essence, allowing them to cast their skills more often. So basically this is just like Diablo 3 combat, where you have these basic abilities that generate your resource, and you'll have stronger abilities that use that resource. I know that there are some people that might not be that happy with this sort of playstyle, and they might prefer the more traditional approach of you have mana, you have life, and here are some potions, now deal with it. But I think this is kind of an innovative way to handle resources in an ARPG, and I think I kind of like it, honestly. I mean, I much rather prefer this over an inventory full of mana potions any day. They go on to say that corpses, on the other hand, are the leftover remains of enemies who died near the Necromancer. These remains can be used to summon skeletal minions or to power various other skills such as Corpse Explosion. In addition to appearing when enemies are killed near the Necromancer, corpses can also be generated via various effects, giving you additional control over how often you want to interact with them. While there will be plenty of corpses at a baseline level, we are aware that some players will want to lean into this resource, and as a result have included plenty of options to ensure that they are not left wanting. One thing that they say here that's pretty interesting is the fact that skeletal minions will need a corpse to be summoned. Since the reveal of the Necromancer, I've seen some comments on Reddit and some under YouTube videos where people were concerned that the Necromancer was able to summon their pets without corpses. And I guess they preferred the D2 approach where you needed a resource or a corpse to summon those skeletons. And we have confirmation here that you will indeed need a corpse to do that, so those players can rejoice. I personally don't really care either way, but yeah, whatever. I mean, I think it gives you something else to micromanage and it's like a problem to solve for your character, which is always good, right? And here we have an image of the corpses that they were talking about. I made a video yesterday doing a deep dive on the Necromancer skills. Some of those skills they actually don't talk about at all in this Diablo quarterly update, so make sure you check that video out if you already haven't. But we talked about these little red beams of light. We were a little uncertain about what they were. We found out that really they're just there as, I guess, an indicator for the player to be like, hey, look, there's a corpse here, you can use it. I don't remember if these beams of lights were in Diablo 3 or not, because Diablo 3 did have these corpses for the Necromancer like this. But I think it's a nice quality of life feature, and hopefully it doesn't become too much, you know, like in the late game if there are corpses everywhere, but I like it. Okay, so they go on to say, as far as weapons and other unique gear, Necromancers use swords, daggers, wands, focuses, and shields. In addition to these, they are also the only class that can use scythes. And here we have a 2-minute long video of the different weapons, armor, and all that stuff that a Necromancer can wear, so I'll play that for you guys right now. Man, that stuff looks really awesome. I think the art team over at World of Warcraft needs to get in touch with somebody at Diablo 4 on how to properly make gear sets. But yeah, I love where they're going with that stuff. They say at the very end of this section here, additionally, what self-respecting necromancer would be running around the world of Sanctuary without curses? We're happy to say that you will be able to put these nasty debuffs on your enemies to your heart's content with skills like Decrepify and Iron Maiden making a return. I love that curses are making a return, and I've played quite a bit of necromancers in Diablo 2, and even being like a support type of necromancer that runs around and just curses things is actually a relatively enjoyable experience, while also, you know, orbs exploding in just D2. So yeah, I'm looking forward to fulfilling that fantasy again in Diablo 4. Okay, on to the playstyles. The Necromancer has 4 high-level playstyles that the players can choose between. These playstyles are Bone, Darkness, Blood, and the Army. First up, we have Bone. Bone skills are relatively physical in nature and thus benefit more heavily from effects such as Critical Strike. These skills also benefit from having and spending large amounts of essence, as they have various effects that can cause each of their individual attacks to be even more powerful. So I like that they're specifying here that Bone skills do really well with Critical Strike, because one of my primary concerns with Diablo 4 is that I was worried that it would end up like Diablo 3, where characters and players primarily focus on cooldown reduction and crit chance and crit damage. And this sentence here kind of makes you think that there are going to be some skills that are more geared towards having crit chance and crit damage, while other skills might not benefit anywhere near as much, or maybe they don't benefit at all. So this little line here just, you know, gives me some hope. They go on to say that Bone Spirit is back in Diablo 4 and now has a unique twist that exemplifies what Bone skills are all about. Bone Spirit not only has a cooldown, but also consumes all essence the player currently has. Once cast, a Spirit Bone is conjured that seeks out the nearest enemy. Upon reaching them, the spirit will explode, dealing a high amount of damage to the target and all other enemies in the area. This damage is increased by a certain percentage point per point of essence spent, meaning that players who spend the maximum amount of essence will deal a significant amount of damage to enemies hit. The skill can also be upgraded so that when it critically strikes, its cooldown is significantly reduced, meaning that players who commit to generating lots of essence while also having a high critical strike chance will get a lot of damage from this skill. And so it seems like they are really leaning into that critical strike theme for all the Bone skills here. Now, some players might not like this because it might feel like to them that the developers are kind of like pushing them in a sort of build direction similar to D3, where they're like, oh well, I have to go crit with my Bone skills, especially Bone Spirit, because the developers have made it this way. But I personally don't think that's a big deal, because, you know, even games like Path of Exile have all these skills in them, and a lot of them are designed in a way to push the player into building that character a certain way, to better utilize the way this skill was designed. Also, I don't think it's really that outlandish for hit-based abilities to be focused on crit chance and crit damage. I mean, the vast majority of hit-based skills in Path of Exile and other related ARPGs mostly scale off of crit chance and crit damage. So all in all, I think it's, you know, pretty good stuff. But I would love to hear your thoughts, so let me know in the comments. They continue with another Bone skill that Necromancers will have access to is Bone Prison. When the player casts Bone Prison, they slam their weapon into the ground, calling forth a circular wall of bone to surround the targeted enemy or area. Enemies cannot move through this space while the Bone Prison persists, which makes it incredibly versatile and able to be combined with many other skills, even those that are not themed around Bone. Bone Prison is great for blocking off hallways, trapping groups of enemies inside to set them up for an AoE attack, or for simply sectioning off a group of enemies to deal with later while you handle high priority targets. This is something we saw in the gameplay reveal video yesterday, and we talked about it and pretty much said exactly what they said here, about how it would be great to set this up or use it to set up for, like, you know, with your group that you're playing with, to use AoE attacks on mobs trapped inside that circle. There are also skills that they don't talk about in this post here that we talked about in the video I posted yesterday of the deep dive of the Necromancer. So make sure you guys check that out whenever you get the chance, because there are a lot of really cool abilities in there. And also make sure you subscribe to the channel, because I'll be doing more videos on Diablo 4 stuff over the course of today, tomorrow, and probably throughout the week. There's a lot more stuff that they've released, a lot of interviews, a lot of other videos that we can go over in greater detail. So yeah, make sure you keep an eye out for all of that stuff. But yeah, let's watch this video real quick. So yeah, as you can see, the Bone Prison circles all the enemies, and then they use Bone Spirit, which actually looks incredible. Combat in D4 is looking better and better every single time I see a video on it. Okay, on to the Darkness skills. Darkness skills use shadow magic to overwhelm their enemies. These kinds of attacks tend to be dot-based or attack multiple times in a short window, with various benefits and rewards being granted for damaging enemies in this way. Now this is an interesting sentence because they say that attacking multiple times in a short window gives you various benefits or rewards. Now I don't know if this just means like you'll get % increased damage for how often you can attack in a short window, or if it's more like poison in Path of Exile, where, you know, the faster you can hit, the more poison stacks you can get on an enemy, which is a playstyle that a lot of people really enjoy. So yeah, I don't know exactly what they're trying to say here, but either way, I think that sounds like it could be pretty fun. Okay, so darkness skills also tend to have various debuffs and crowd control elements so that they can keep their enemies at bay while they die a slow, painful death. I also just feel like, you know, using these types of skills where you're dotting them up seems like they could work really, really well with Bone Prison. You know, you just trap them in the prison and then throw the dot on the ground and watch them rot away. They go on to say that Decompose is a basic darkness skill that allows you to channel dark magic onto enemies, dealing damage to them while also generating essence. Unlike other basic skills, Decompose also periodically summons corpses, making it much easier to ensure that you have a steady supply on hand to use for summoning skeletons. Another darkness skill is Blight. Blight launches a ball of dark energy in a direction. Upon hitting an enemy or expiring, it deals an explosion of damage while leaving behind a defiled area, dealing periodic damage to enemies inside over time. This skill deals a high amount of damage to enemies who are standing in place, whether that's due to fighting your undead minions or to being contained via other skills like Bone Prison. This is an interesting skill. We actually saw this skill in the gameplay video yesterday. We talked about it. We thought maybe it was just a ball of cum, or maybe some sort of ghost flame ability like from Elden Ring is kind of what it looked like, but we had no idea what it was doing because the effect was really small and kind of hard to see. And now here we're getting more detail about that skill. So let's watch the video on the dark skills here. So we can see them using Decompose on the enemy, and we can see it summoning corpses like they said it would. It's interesting though, because at the end of the clip, you can see them casting Blight multiple times in a row. And you would think with a dot-based skill that you might just want to throw it out once and let that dot do the damage. But like it said at the beginning of the darkness section, you could benefit with multiple attacks in a short window and maybe be rewarded for doing so, which is possibly what we're seeing in this video here and why they're spamming the ability. Okay, on to the blood skills. Necromancers can also use the power of blood magic to siphon the life from their enemies. Not only do these skills tend to have defensive-oriented benefits, they also have many ways to turn that defense into offense for the player, empowering them and rewarding them for having large amounts of maximum health, as well as keeping their current health total high. Blood Surge draws a small amount of blood from nearby enemies to the Necromancer that then expels a Blood Nova, dealing damage near the player's location. The damage of the Blood Nova is increased per enemy drained, which incentivizes you to be in the middle of a pack of enemies for maximum effect. We actually saw this skill in the gameplay video yesterday at the very end, and we talked about it in depth, and actually they're saying exactly what I thought it did. We actually saw this skill at the very end of the gameplay video yesterday, and we talked about it in my video, and they are saying exactly what we thought it did, which is where you deal more damage with the more enemies you have around you to suck blood from to cast this ability, which is actually really cool. That means that this ability could be really, really good for clearing out large groups of monsters, but it might not be so good for single target damage, which is okay, because then that forces you to build into another skill or, you know, whatever to deal with bosses. Maybe even play with another character who's better at killing bosses and you're better at clearing the map, or clearing the dungeons rather. They go on to say that another blood skill is Blood Mist. Upon activation, the Necromancer disperses into a bloody mist, becoming temporarily immune to all damage while draining the life of any nearby enemies that they pass through. This is a universally powerful defensive skill that can give you the time you need to regroup in those dire moments where you become overwhelmed. And here we get to see a little video clip of both of these skills. Man, I just can't get over how visceral and satisfying the combat looks in D4. Okay, and on to the last little section here on the class features, we have the army. As you would expect, Necromancers can summon the undead to do their bidding. We also allow players to specialize into empowering their armies as much as possible, which includes various kinds of skeletons as well as the classic golem. One advantage to this method of playing is that it can easily incorporate the benefits of bone, darkness, or blood skills allowing you to have a great deal of customization to how you want to interact with your army. As an example, we believe it will be perfectly viable to have a player pursue a darkness-themed army build with Decompose as their basic skill to generate corpses, as there is an obvious synergy there. However, if the player wishes to generate corpses via other means, they can just as easily take a nostalgia trip to the year 2000 and just chuck bone spears at their enemies from a distance while opting for all the bone skill synergies that the Necromancer has to offer. We went through a lot of iteration on how we want the experience of summoning the undead to feel for the player and how much of their skill bar should be dedicated to this part of the class. To that end, we've come up with what we feel is the best possible version to ensure that players have as much customization as possible over not only their army itself, but also in which other skills they want to use to support their own unique playstyle. If a player wants to have the maximum number of summoned units possible, then they will only have to dedicate 2 buttons to their skill bar, one to raising skeletons and the other for their golem. That's actually pretty cool. I don't know how many more buttons that gives you, like what, 4 or 5 more buttons that you can play around with, but it's kind of nice to know that if you have the corpses available, you can just hit one button and all your skeletons are there. I'm really interested to see if they give players the option of like commanding their undead army in any way, or if it's all just going to be purely AI based. I mean, I already know that golems will have like a command skill, but I'm not so sure about the skeletons. I don't know, maybe players prefer more of like the AFK approach where the skeletal minions just do their own thing and you kind of run around. I mean, I know I have definitely enjoyed a summoner in D2 quite a bit, and I've enjoyed summoner-based classes in a lot of other games, so I wouldn't be opposed to the idea of an AFK army. But I do think that there is something to be said for having some control over what they attack, who they attack, and how they attack them. But okay, let's continue. The Raise Skeleton button is a one-stop shop to raise all the different skeletons a player can summon. And the Golem button is used to command the Golem to use a unique effect that is dependent on the type of Golem that is currently active. With this setup, we found a great balance between having the necessary tools for raising and commanding a Necromancer army while also leaving room for player expression and what additional skills they want to put on their bar. And here we see an image of, the Necromancer army. It looks like they have the Bone Golem with them, with some skeletal mages and some skeletal warriors, it looks like. I think they call them something else in this. We'll get to that in a second here. Okay, and lastly we have the Book of the Dead. Speaking of armies, what self-respecting necromancer isn't wandering around with one? Well, actually, that might be you. While we absolutely have the full support you would expect to fulfill all your undead summoning needs, we are also giving some love to players who want a more independent playstyle. Here's a little preview of the Book of the Dead. I personally don't like the way it looks. I've seen some other in-game footage of the Book of the Dead, which we will make a whole separate video on. But I think this is just very early development stuff. It very clearly needs a lot of work, and I think it's pretty obvious that this is early development stuff. So I would not expect it to look like this. But yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it. Hopefully they change it. But we can see that there are skeletal warriors, skeletal mages, and golems in the Book of the Dead. Cue the Book of the Dead, the Necromancer's unique class mechanic. Right from the moment you log in, you will start with an extra skill on your bar, Raise Skeleton. Just like Diablo 2 when you have the little wand. With this button, you will immediately be able to raise undead warriors to fight by your side. In addition to this, you will have access to the Book of the Dead. This is a space where you can customize your army, or lack thereof, with increasing options as you level your character. There are 3 customizable summons in this space: Skeletal Warriors, Skeletal Mages, and the Golem. Each summon also has one of 3 specializations that you can choose from. As an example, you can have your Skeletal Warriors be Skirmishers, Defenders, or Reapers. Skirmishers are a more standard warrior but have increased damage and reduced health. Defenders have bonus health, and Reapers have slower attacks, deal damage and AoE in front of them, and have a special wind-up attack that deals a high amount of damage. This is something we actually went over in the gameplay video yesterday because we noticed that there were different types of skeleton warriors. We saw that there were some that were blowing themselves up. We saw some that just had swords and shields. We saw some mages, and we also saw these skeleton warriors with these huge 2-handed scythes. And I thought, what does this mean? Does this mean that when you summon your skeletons, they could just randomly summon with different appearances? Or do these weapons and these things that they have equipped actually have an effect on their playstyle? And we discussed the ones with the scythes, saying that, oh, well, maybe they have more AoE and more damage or whatever, and it looks like that's exactly the case here. And I love this. I think this is awesome. Giving players the option to do things like this means that you could possibly have a playstyle where you have these Reaper summons to deal all the AoE damage to, clearing out a dungeon, but they might not be so great at single target where you could, supplement that with something like Blight or whatever, right? But yeah, I love this stuff. I think this is all great stuff. In addition to this, each specialized unit in the army has unique upgrades available to them. Giving you even more customization over how each unit in their army functions in their overall playstyle. These units and upgrades will have synergies with the various playstyles mentioned above, as well as add other potential ways to play. And as you can see here, we have the Skeletal Warriors section of the Book of the Dead, where it shows us the Skirmishers, Defenders, and Reapers, and it also shows us that they have 2 different options for upgrading and then an option for sacrificing them. This is something that we can go into greater detail about in a separate video, because there's, like I said, a whole other video that we can go over with way more detail about the Necromancer that goes more in depth about stuff like this. But I think it's very, very obvious here that this is not a finished image of the Book of the Dead. I mean, look at these very generic images they have for Skirmishers, Defenders, and Reapers. I mean, it looks like they need a lot of work. Also, the fact that there are only 2 options for upgrading and then 1 option for sacrificing, it's pretty boring, I personally think. Hopefully over time, maybe when the game first releases, they only have a couple options. But I really hope that, over the next few years or whatever, when they're continually updating the game, that we can get more things like upgrades for the Necromancer summons. Okay, so in addition to all this customization, we have also added the ability for players to sacrifice different components of their army for personal benefits. Next to each unit type in the Book of the Dead is an extra option to sacrifice the ability to summon that unit in exchange for personal permanent buff. These buffs are carefully designed and placed so that players can mix and match, having none, some, or all the possible summoned units while still having relevant options to enhance their build. So I do know that you can sacrifice, I think, one of your golems. I think it's the bone golem. You can sacrifice it to have like 10% increased attack speed or something like that, which we already know the darkness skills benefit from having more attack speed. So that's just one way you could look at this, of like these synergies between these things and decisions you might want to make about whether or not you want to have a bone golem or you want to sacrifice it for the attack speed for like a more blight focused or darkness focused build. They say that their goal with this system is that there should be something for everyone to be excited about. There are relevant, powerful options to choose from, whether players want to play with the full army, part of the army, or even for those who wish to forego their army completely and play solo. We've had a blast playing with this system so far, and we're excited to see the various combinations that you all come up with to push your Necromancers to the next level. And here we have their final thoughts. We're so excited to be able to bring the Necromancer to Diablo 4, and we can't wait to get it into your hands. Whether you're a veteran player who's put in thousands of hours over many years, or a new adventurer in the world of Sanctuary, we hope you will have a lot of fun with what we've been able to create. As always, please leave us your feedback on what we've shown you so far. While we're confident that we're on the right track, we know that the best ideas and the best games are created with input from the community. I'm sorry, that's kind of laughable, because I think Blizzard is like notorious for not listening to their community, and they do it in literally every game they create. They do it in fucking World of Warcraft. They did it in Diablo 3. They do it, and I'm sure they probably do it in Overwatch. And I'm sure they do it in fucking Hearthstone. Who knows? I don't play that shit, but they probably don't listen to their community over there either. This whole debacle with Diablo Immortal, holy shit. But yeah, I don't know. They say it here, and I think they've been kind of doing an okay job with working with the community in Diablo 4. They have made lots of changes. The itemization and stuff has changed quite a bit from what we first saw at the reveal of BlizzCon like 3 years ago, whenever it was. So they do look like they have made some effort to listen to our feedback. And there's some other things that they have actually talked about recently, like Paragons, which there'll be a whole separate video on stuff like the Paragons in in-game. Because there's been an interview recently with some of the developers from Diablo 4 that we are going to go over. So yeah, keep an eye out for that, because that video will probably be out later today. But yeah, they go on to say, thank you all so much for your patience and for joining us on this epic journey through the world of Sanctuary. We promise it will be worth the wait. During the reveal yesterday, towards the end, when it was getting really obvious that they were going to put up the release date, which they didn't put up the date, like the actual date, but they put up the year that it was coming out, I was really hoping, part of me was like, please say 2022, please. And then 2023 popped up, and that was expected. I've been thinking for the last year and a half that it was going to be 2023 that when Diablo 4 released, so it's not a surprise at all. I just really hope we don't have to wait until the end of 2023 or like July. I mean, fingers crossed it'll be like early 2023, but I doubt it, because as you can kind of see in this post, it looks like there's still quite a bit of work they have left to do with like polish and things. I mean, the Book of the Dead looks fairly new. The Necromancer stuff in general just seems kind of new. So yeah, you know, I think they still have, you know, quite a bit of work left. So we could probably expect to see D3, I would assume towards the end of 2023, if we're really lucky, like mid 2023, but I highly doubt it would be early 2023. I would love to hear your thoughts on the Necromancer and the mechanics they showed us in this quarterly update. And make sure to keep an eye out for more videos in the near future, because there's a lot more Diablo 4 related content for me to go over, and even more about the Necromancer. So yeah, make sure you keep an eye out. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you soon.